I'm a lucky man. I'm also a professional musician, which is arguably another way of saying I'm a lucky man. Music has taken me around the world. It's introduced me to some of my best friends and even my wife. It's supported me for the years that I've been working at all. I'm deeply grateful for that. So 18 years into my music career, things were looking good. I had a new CD out. It was my 10th album. I had a full calendar, and I had lots and lots and lots of hair. And that's when I quit. I got this email from an old friend of mine in England who had just finished a master's degree in peace and conflict resolution that was fully funded by Rotary International as a Rotary Peace Fellow. And it snapped my head around sideways. I thought, I've got to go do that now. It was almost a mystical reaction that I had. In college, conflict mediation had really been my focus. But in the years since then, as a musician, it had been squeezed a bit to the side. When I got that email, it was clear that it was time for me to put peace work back in the middle of my life. So I talked to my wife about it. Amazing woman that she is, she said, yeah, okay, go for that. And then I applied for that same fellowship. It's internationally competitive, and I had no reason to believe I would get it, but I went ahead and announced a farewell tour and told people that I was leaving music, at least for a time, to focus on peace work. So my wife and my 10-week-old baby, our 10-week-old baby, and I moved to Australia to study at the University of Queensland when I did, in fact, against the odds, get the fellowship. I think Mason might have been the youngest applicant for a passport that year. He was just a few days old. And since then, I've been pretty heavily engaged in peace work, both in the US and in other places around the world. And I don't need to tell you that there's no shortage of peace work to do, right? We have plenty of conflict, and we know that we're living in a particularly divisive time right now in the US. But it can seem a little bit overwhelming. I mean, what does peace work look like for us as individuals? How do we find our way into that work? Here's the irony. I stepped away from music to do peace work. And in my studies and in my work, I keep coming up against the fact that music provides us really quite a powerful tool in peace. Not just as an actual tool to shift conflict dynamics and build bridges across divides, but as a metaphor, a lens we can look through to help understand what peace work is and what it isn't. Let me give you a couple of examples. I think most of us agree that in order to be a good song, a song has to be creative. Excellence in music isn't just about adhering closely to rules. There has to be a spark of originality. You may be surprised to hear me say that the same is true of peace work, because we kind of expect peace work to come naturally, to know what to do, right? And it doesn't. We know from grade school science class what does come naturally most of the time when we're faced with aggression. Fight and flight. The theologian and nonviolent scholar Walter Wink said that our best options, however, are usually neither of those. Usually there's a third option, what he called a third way, that can be a little bit more innovative and maybe get us a little bit farther down the road. I want to tell you about my favorite example of that. It happened in 2007 in Knoxville, Tennessee. There was a Klan and neo-Nazi rally in Knoxville, just over the mountain from where we are now. And the counter-protesters came out in numbers, and some of them came out with brilliant creativity. They came dressed in full clown regalia, and the Ku Klux Clowns met the Ku Klux Klan that day. When the Klan began to chant white power, the clowns listened very closely, like they couldn't quite understand what they were saying. And then they joined right in enthusiastically because they figured out that this was a rally for white flour. They had brought bags of white flour, and they threw flour in the air. And they had a whole lot of fun. And people started laughing at the Klan rally and ignoring the Klan. So they worked that gag for a few minutes, and then they said, wait, I don't think that's what it was at all. I don't think this is a rally for white flour. I think it's a rally for white flowers. And they started handing out flowers to everybody, and people were smiling. And then they said, no, that wasn't it again. Another clown said, oh, I think we heard them wrong. I don't think it was white flowers. I think it was tight showers, and held up a camp shower, and they all crowded beneath it. And then they said, no, that wasn't it at all. This is actually a rally for wipe power, and they threw toilet paper in the air. And then they said, no, 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 that wasn't it at all. This is a rally for wife power, and we can get behind that. They pulled on their wedding dresses and joined in, chanting wife power, wife power. The upshot was that the Klan left an hour and a half early. They had the town square reserved for 4 hours, but they left after 2.5 because they had no idea how to deal with this, right? I mean, they know about animosity. They kind of thrive on that. They know about your fear, and they like that part too. But when they were upstaged by humor and fun, they had no idea how to respond. So the best peace and justice work, like the best music, is inspired and planned for and skilled and extremely creative. There has to be a little bit of conflict in music for it to work. As soon as a melody goes in a direction we don't expect it to, or a rhyme surprises us, there's a little bit of tension in that song, right? A little bit of conflict, and that helps. It makes us lean in. It makes the song work better. If it doesn't go anywhere, if it's just one note repeating, well, you know the word monotonous. That's a synonym for boring. But literally, it means monotonous, right? It's one note repeating. That's not music. That's a garbage truck backing up. But surprisingly, perhaps, I want to make the argument that there's a good and healthy place for conflict within piecework as well. And we often understand piecework as an effort to quell conflict, to eliminate conflict, but that's not actually how it looks to me. I had the extraordinary opportunity a few years ago to spend some time with John Lewis, the civil rights hero and U.S. congressman, and we were talking about ways that we think piecework is generally misunderstood in our culture. And he told me some amazing stories, and one of the things he said that I'll never forget, he said, Dr. King used to say to me, and just with the preamble to that sentence, all the hairs in my arm stood up. He said, Dr. King used to say to me, sometimes you have to turn the world upside down in order to set it right. Conflict is often necessary on the way to justice. And we can't help but notice that when we look at the lives of our greatest peacemakers, the folks we revere worldwide, though most of them were deeply committed to nonviolence, it seems like everywhere they went, people ended up bloody. So are we wrong to call them peacemakers? I don't think so. I think we need to nuance our understanding of what peace means. To me, peacemaking is not an effort to eliminate conflict. Peacemaking is the art of approaching conflict in ways that are constructive rather than destructive. But notice that the verb in that sentence is approaching. So that little infant we saw in the passport photo, he's now 8, and he's learning to play violin. You may notice that I lost my hair, but he found it. We endure some squeaky notes in the afternoons in my house, and I don't mind. That's the sound of learning, and it's pretty exciting to me to watch him work so hard and really make progress. And the thing that I say to him all the time is, buddy, if you want to be really good at a musical instrument, the main thing you need is a willingness to be bad at it long enough. That's what practice is. We work out those skills when it doesn't matter so that later when it does matter, they come naturally. Again, we may not necessarily see peacemaking through quite the same lens, but it would be appropriate to try that lens on. John Lewis, who we saw a moment ago, he and his compatriots practiced for an entire year every Wednesday night before they ever staged their first lunch counter sit-in. They screamed at each other. They literally dragged each other across the room by the hair. They studied nonviolence so that their bodies and their minds would be ready when they got there. This is how we do the work. We show up and we do it badly, and we notice, and we make notes, and we study, and we improve our skills. In a word, we practice. Audiences at concerts often feel like their role is pretty passive, I've found, that the output is happening on the stage and their role is just to receive. Anybody who has spent much time on stage will tell you that that's the furthest thing from the truth. A good live performer is constantly tuned in to what they're getting back from the audience. And while they're listening to the audience, they're listening to their own instrument to make sure that it's in tune. And they're listening to the other folks in the band to make sure they're in the groove. And they're listening to the moment to see if it needs them to step forward or step back. obviously, listening is a huge piece of conflict resolution as well. It is pretty much impossible for someone to work on the nuts and bolts of a conflict if they don't feel heard. And when they do feel heard and understood, not necessarily agreed with, but really, truly heard, it's extraordinary how new possibilities for ways forward together can emerge. Yet, when we come up against conflict, it seems to me that our most common questions are, what can I say to make this better? What can I do to fix it? Miles Davis said, it's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't play. And I wonder if that might be the best place for us to start in conflict. What you can say maybe is a little less. What you can do is listen. There's this extraordinary moment that's happened a handful of times in my life when I've been at a concert and a song ends and fades into silence. And it's been so moving and so haunting that nobody claps. Now, we have a well-established social convention that at the end of a good song, we're all supposed to clap, right? What I want to know is this: how do 2,000 people in a room together make the decision not to clap without discussing it? In a moment like that, it's as though we've all melted into one aggregate personality. Of course, there are some people who hear that story and say, yeah, okay, that was a lovely feeling, but it wasn't real. I mean, it was a nice vacation from reality, and tomorrow morning, you've got to wake up and go back to the cruel, competitive world and deal with that. What if it's the other way around? What if the sense of connection actually is the part that's true? And the sense of disconnectedness, of loneliness, of isolation that a lot of us walk around with a lot of the time, what if that part is the illusion? Now, when we bring that sense of connectedness to conflict work, everything changes. They shift from being a conflict between us and them to being a conflict between different parts of us. And that means people are harder to dismiss. It means that we can find it a little easier to muster some empathy. It can change everything. Every once in a while, somebody asks me, how long did it take you to learn to play the guitar? Of course, the only sensible answer to that question is, I don't know yet. Right? I hope to be playing my whole life, and I hope to be learning that entire time. Peace work is a little bit like that. There isn't an end point that we're going for. It's about the stretching on the way. I have this old bumper sticker that says, peace is possible, on an old guitar case. And I have to be honest that over the years, I've become a little less comfortable with that statement. I'm not sure I believe it's true. If peace is a static state where we've worked out all our conflict and everybody's relaxed, I'm not at all sure that's true. I'm not even sure it's a good idea. But that's not bad news. That's reframing. Think about this. When we look at a tree, we don't say, wow, what a failure. It spends its entire life trying to touch the sun. No luck, right? It wouldn't be good for the tree to touch the sun. It's not its job. Its job is to reach. And in reaching, it becomes a healthier tree, and it also helps the world around us. It kind of makes me want to bust out my Sharpie and fix my old bumper sticker and add a word. Because the question isn't, is peace possible? The question is more peace possible? Can we do any better than we're doing right now? I think we can, and I think it's worth the effort. As I explored my own capacity to have an impact in the world, I feel like I've learned some things about everybody's capacity to have an impact in the world. And here's the main shift that's happened for me. I stopped believing that heroes matter much. I started believing that it's movements that change the world. That means all of us doing a little bit each, bringing our own parts, moving in the same direction. That's what a movement is. And that's good news for those of us who want to have a positive impact, because it means that we all actually do have the capacity to change the world. Now, granted, you start dropping the phrase change the world in company without irony, people are going to do some eye rolling because it sounds naive. But the fact is, it's not naive to think you can change the world. The problem is we're sloppy with our semantics. We use the phrases change the world and fix the world and save the world like they are interchangeable, and they are not. They don't mean the same thing. If you think you can fix the world, I'm sorry to say, that is naive. If you think you can save the world, that might not be your gig. But if you think you can change the world, you're just paying attention. The truth is, you can't be in the world and not change it. Everything you do changes the world, whether you like it or not. So the question for each of us is which changes we're going to make and how we go about getting started. What's bugging you right now? What do you see when you look around you that doesn't feel right? Where are the people who care about what you care about? Go and show up and spend some time with them. Listen and learn from them, and then offer your gifts. Pick something you can actually achieve, and then do it together. And then pick the next thing and do that too. That really is how the world changes. So there are lots of synonyms for peace, and I've become more enamored with some of them over the years and a little less attracted to others. This one I think is my favorite. Harmony beats unity. Looking at piecework through the lens of a musician, you can't help but notice that unity is when we're all singing the same note together. Harmony is when we're singing different notes, and they create beauty together. Through that diversity, true beauty loves diversity. It's part of it. So I can't think of a better way to leave you all today than with just a little bit of harmony. Peace be upon you. Peace be upon you. Peace be upon you.